Welcome to a compilation of Pocket Jacks from Tactical Tuesday episodes. Enjoy.
So once again, we have our Wolf who's playing 200 no limit. And we have a villain that opens minimum. They're playing with, looks to be like 48 big blinds. So kind of a very odd stack. They open minimum. Don't really know whether or not they're white belt, whether or not they're reg. So we'll just kind of work under the assumption that they're probably more white belty than reg because they're not a full stack. The Wolf 3-bets to $20. And the villain calls. The flop is 9-4-3, rainbow. There's 41 in the pot. Wolf has villain covered. Villain has $76 behind. What do you like here, John?
I'm really glad that this villain is a white belt because I think that has a really big impact on my strategy. Also the SPR. In this spot, I would actually do something that I would never do versus a reg and check this flop with my overpair and give the white belt a chance to just overstab. I think that just using pre-flop frequencies and assumptions, I can probably be pretty confident in the fish just finding too many stabs on just every flop texture or every situation. And the reason that I think I can make that connection is that one thing that I know about fish is that they just play too many hands pre-flop. They open too many hands and they call too many 3-bets. They just, VPIP way too much or are way too happy to see a flop essentially. And I think what that does on every flop texture is that just leaves them with too many hands that they need to bluff, just like too many zero equity hands. And I think that when I start c-betting this board texture, I given the SPR, we're just over 2. Like I stack their bluff catchers very, very easily, even starting out with like a flop check, right? So by checking this flop, I let them stab with a range that I've already determined is too wide. So it's going to show up, with, I don't know what fish, like queen 8 suited here, or just hands that regs would never have. I think fish are a little bit also prone to just thinking that my check is going to be imbalanced and unprotected and just be like, again, a little bit too trigger happy for that reason. So yeah, all of those things together just make me want to check and give the fish as much rope as possible for him to hang himself. And if he doesn't, then the SPR is so low that, we can get it in very easily on 2 streets, or we could still get it in on 1 street with 2x pot jam on the river.
Yeah, I think due to the villain being a white belt, there's so many different ways. You could bet really, really, really small. You could bet a third. You could bet quarter. You could, you can check. Probably not going to be like doing much big betting at this SPR. So yeah, a lot of options available here. Pretty advantageous spot. The Wolf ends up betting half pot, which again, I think is a viable option. It's not the end of the world. The white belt is probably still going to call a lot of hands. You definitely want them to call as many hands as you can find. Yeah.
And again, like going off my pre-flop assumptions, the nice thing here is that like the white belt is going to have like king 3 suited and
sure,
jack 4 suited, just like, tons of bluff catchers. Sure. So I don't know exactly what they do. And I check, like they might just freak out and start betting for protection, which is the nice thing about checking, but they also just have way more bluff catchers here to call with than the average reg.
Sure. So start out with half. Villain calls. Turn is the ace of spades. So ace 4, 3, 9 with the ace 4 spades. There's $79 in the pot. Villain has $56 remaining. So SPR is under 1. I think it's pretty obvious the turn action that hero should take.
I don't know. I'm scared now that it's obvious because what were you going to say? You go first.
I mean, the obvious thing for me would be to check. And I don't know that there's an argument for doing anything other than checking.
I thought that the reason for jamming the turn is that I think that one of the reads that I have versus fish is that I think they just stack off way too light, and that a fish might just put it all in here with a hand like 6-4 or 6-3, maybe something with a little bit more hope than that, maybe a hand like 4-5.
Maybe, but if they do, then if they do, then if turn checks through, you can still jam river, right? Like it's not hopeless.
Yeah, that's true. You have another opportunity left on the river. I was just kind of making the argument that like I think just when I've like bluff jammed these spots, I'm always like not always, but very frequently like, oh my god, like how's he call with 3rd pair or 4th pair or something like that? And
sure.
That's something I think about when I'm value betting. or how the option to value bet.
Well, the hero does not bet, they check. And the white belt jams, I think kind of, they jam 56 into 79, and yeah, just hero needs to win about 30% of the time. Going to be hard for the white belt to have more than 70% equity here against jacks, I think. So hero just doesn't really have, I don't think hero has much of a decision here as to whether call to fold, but I think for the listener, it may look a little bit dicey on the turn ace, but yeah, I think you just have to flick it in and go with it.
Yeah, I mean, this is not even I wouldn't even call this flicking it in. I'd be like, yeah, let's put it in.
So we put it in. River's the king of spades, which is probably not great. And the villain, who's almost certainly now a white belt, ends up with ace king and wins a pot and didn't jam pre. And honestly, this whole episode of Tactical Tuesday could have just been avoided if they would have just jammed pre and never would have been able to break this one down. So sad for the wolf involved, but happy that we got to talk about the hand on Tactical Tuesday.
Yeah, glad we got a fish this time instead of a reg. That had really big impacts on my actions.
And so now, what might possibly be the last pocket jacks with a turnover card hand that we break down on Tactical Tuesday for a little while. We have a low jack open to $5. Again, we're playing 200 NL. We have Wolf and the big blind who 3-bets to $22 with black jacks. And the low jack villain calls. There is $45 in the pot. Once again, we get this 10-6-4 with 2 diamonds. Flop, there's 45 in the middle. Hero's got 178. Villain has hero covered. Villain is probably a reg in this situation, but really it's difficult to say. So John, jacks on 10-6-4, 2 diamonds. I think it's going to be the John special, huh?
Yeah, if you listened to last week's episode, you probably already know what I'm going to do here. I won't go too in-depth into it because we talked about it so much last week. But yeah, I would start out with a large c-bet here, something around the 2/3, 3/4 pot size.
And
Man, these guys ever listen?
The wolf bets a third. It's oh man, this is it's good, right? It shows us that, hey, these guys are not listening to us. What are they doing here betting a third with jacks on 10-6-4, 2 diamonds? For the Tactical Tuesday listener, just know that because we're breaking down these hands on Tactical Tuesday, the Wolves are going to get a reaming for their sizing selections here on these boards. Not exactly sure what's going on. So low jack calls because, well, we bet a third. Turn is the ace of hearts, which, you know what? They deserve it. I'm glad the turn is an ace of hearts here.
Yeah, you probably deserve the ace of diamonds on the turn, not even ace of hearts, right?
Well, I want the ace of hearts just because it creates a little bit of ambiguity as to like whether or not you can call the turn. If they bet the turn or what's going on. Like, I think the ace of diamonds would make it clear they got to fold, but here I want them to suffer some. I want some pain to be inflicted on them. So hero checks, villain bets what looks to be 75% on the turn. Hero has 163.88 remaining. What do you think facing this turn bet, John?
Yeah, first just going back to the decision to check. Same thing as last week's episode. If you want to hear more about why Brad and I both are on team check on the turn, you can check out last week's Pocket Jacks episode. Here, facing this size, I mean, I'm not happy, but I'm just going to call with jacks. I think there's a chance that they bet the turn and check back the river. So there's like one just easy way where we get to realize our equity. Yeah, the size is a little concerning. I think I would be really confident in their bet turn, check back river frequency being high if they bet like a third, if they block the turn, this size could just signal that, hey, look, I'm playing for stacks. I'm ready to play for stacks. I guess now that I say that out loud, I'm a little bit more in the fold camp. Okay. I've pivoted. I'm in team fold facing this size. I'm just worried about visibility on the river, right? Like I think we're going to get jammed on the river by all sorts of value, all sorts of bluffs, and I'm not confident in my ability to discern, like, when is Jack's a good bluff catcher on the river facing jam, and it seems like that's given the turn size, that's what's imminent. Like, do I just get bluffed by king queen and diamond hands and stuff, or do I incorrectly stack off on a non-draw completing river on a brick river because, hey, they also have sets and ace 10 and potentially even ace king, given that this is the big blind 3-bet that can bet big on the turn and jam the river. So I would be more selective with the hands that I decide to continue on the turn facing this size, and likely just go some sort of I would prefer continuing with some sort of 10x, right? Like the nice thing about that is that it blocks ace 10, pocket tens, and has 5 outs to improve to 2 pair versus their ace king, ace queen value bets relative to just the 2 outs that we have with pocket jacks. Maybe not even 2 outs. If they have a hand like ace king of diamonds, we could only have 1 out. So yeah, I'm going to fold these types of pocket pairs, and I'm going to continue with a pair on the board, preferably an ace. Definitely all my ace X.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you pivoted, because that was, one of the reasons why I thought these two hands were especially interesting, is that, hand number 1, I think it's a slam dunk call with jacks on the turn ace when the SPR is small and when villain is a white belt. Here, the situation is really different. You didn't mention that, it's a low jack open and a low jack defend versus a big blind 3-bet, where their natural bluffs, the well is fairly dry, I think, especially when we have 2 jacks. Like, we actually block king jack and queen jack, which may be two hands like king jack of clubs, queen jack of clubs, queen jack of spades, king jack of spades, potentially, because we've got a third, so they may just call with all their overcard type hands. I don't like blocking those hands, and I also think that the low jacks defend versus 3-bet range, like this just is going to limit their availability to have a ton of hands to bluff with. And when they bet 75% on the turn, I just think hey, they're kind of like letting us off the hook here, and we should just fold. And I think it's to me, I think it's a pretty clear fold, which, is going to mean inevitably that the wolf is going to call this bet and just get put in the literal blender on the river. If I had to guess, every suggestion that I think we've made so far has gone the other way, besides last hand.
I think a big lesson for this spot for the listener is that, hey, if you can see the blender coming at you on the river, you can start folding the turn with hands that just don't improve, or are just sort of very, very difficult to figure out where you are on the river, are extra blended on the river. So I think what Brad and I are saying here is we can see the blender coming because of the size of the bet here on the turn. And in order to just not get put in the blender on the river, we would just fold the turn here with this hand and continue with hands that improve more frequently or block their value, or just better candidates for whatever reason.
Yeah, you're driving down the interstate and you see a sign that says blender 2 exits away. Just get off on the next exit and just bypass the blender. Don't pass the blender. The wolf goes right in the blender. River's a 9 of hearts.
No jack this time.
No jack for them. Thank goodness. They don't deserve to be bailed out here. They check. Oh, look at that. The villain jams. And I don't even want to know what the wolf does at this point. I really hope they fold, but who knows? Yeah, they could take any option.
Came this far.
They do fold. They do end up making the fold on the river. Should have folded the turn. Do we have visibility? Wow, the low jack had ace king again. That's 2 pocket jacks, 2 flop over pairs, 2 ace kings. Quite consistent theme for today's episode of Tactical Tuesday.
Less shocking to see ace king here, right?
Sure.
You're 100 big blinds effective. It's a low jack open and a big blind 3-bet.
Sure.
So again,
right.
not. I don't think this is a spot where we can bash this guy pre-flop for not ripping the ace king.
I'm not bashing. I'm commenting on how the situations were so similar in two different hands. But yeah, definitely, just fold the turn and avoid the blender exit. But whatever. Maybe after listening to this episode back, the wolf will learn their lesson and avoid the blender moving forward. There's nothing like public shaming to get somebody on the straight and narrow. And if you want to tune in for more public shaming in the future, hit that subscribe button, and me and John will be your appointed shamers on a week in and week out basis.
Yeah, we have some work to do. We have some wolves to track down and kneecap in the next few days, I think.
They're about to go in a literal blender. All right.
If you don't see us next week, you probably look up which jail we're in for.
Yeah. Check the news, your news feed.
I knew this was going to be tough as soon as I showed up and saw the jacks and the small blind. So, I mean, I didn't even need all the other complexity to start dreading this episode. But let's kick it off. Let's see what happens. I assume we start out with a 3-bet somewhere.
I hope so. So these are hands, submitted by the Wolves. So hope the Wolves are 3-betting jacks. They do. We have a open from the hijack to $6 and the small blind, us, 3-bets jacks to $24, and the hijack makes the call. So we have a flop of 10-7 tray. There's also like a extra little quirk in this, but looks like we're starting about 200 big blinds deep. So we do have some depth compared to usual here. Can't really say anything about villain, have no data points other than, the fact that they open 3x. So don't really know if they're, reg or white belt, but we're 200 big blinds deep. Flop is 10-7-3 with a 10-3 of hearts. We have jack of hearts, jack of spades. Starting with a flop, what do you think here?
I guess I'll just talk about what my personal strategy would be in these nodes. Flopping an overpair on a 10-high board. Think just 10-high boards in general, or especially 10-high two-tone boards. I'm going to be playing probably some bigger bets, some bigger C bets, and also playing some checks. I think given that strategy, pocket jacks just very simply would fall into a big value bet. So I'd bet something along the lines of 2/3 or 3/4 pot on the flop. That's how I would start with jacks.
Cool. Yep. I'm down. The Wolf does not start out with half or 3/4. They start out with a third, which I agree with you that I would certainly be using a bigger size on 10-7-3 2 hearts.
That I just want to be clear that we're just because the Wolf isn't doing what I would do. I'm not bashing this strategy at all. I think that there is a very, very strong strategy that you could have that starts out with 1/3 pot on the flop. In fact, back when I was playing 200 and all myself, my flop C bet size on this board texture would have been a 1/3 pot with my entire range. I think especially if you're kind of, as this Wolf is playing 200 NL, I think if you're sort of on the lower stake side of or end of the spectrum, something that can be really beneficial is just having a simple, easy to execute strategy that you can repeat over and over again, and not having to split sizes or split your range into a betting range and a checking range, and just simply betting your entire range for a third is, I think one of the simplest ways to make sure that you have a strategy that you can remember and execute.
Yeah, I would say that this Wolf is terrible. I don't know what they're thinking, and they really need to question their life choices. No, I'm with you that you can get away with betting it there. It's not the end of the world. The in-position player does call. Turn, as promised, is the one that we're probably not really enjoying. The ace of diamonds. Kind of interestingly, the fact that the Wolf bet a third here could mean that they have more ace-x in their range on the turn ace, rather than when they start out with 50 or 75. And so this situation, starting out with a third on the flop, isn't necessarily the end of the world on this specific card. There are some benefits here where, maybe they are betting, more hands than they should, or something like 75% or 60% of their range, and they have like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, all the back doors, as well as like maybe some offsuit combos that they're c-betting as well. So yeah, I would say that not the worst card when they bet a third, but would
Can I
yeah, go ahead.
Let me try like structuring the question this way. So like, let's say in this world where our strategy on the flop is to range bet a third, what would your turn strategy be given, let's say you're constrained to playing that strategy on the flop?
My turn strategy on this card specifically?
Yep.
Checking. I would check probably range.
Okay. Why would you check range instead of,
because while I have
split?
While I have like a bunch of single paired hands, I find that splitting would just, while we have the ace X in our range, like the villain certainly has all the ace X in their range too. Like they're never folding any ace X to a third, which is like, that's the downside of betting a third, is that villain maintains all of their ace X in their range. When we start with 75%, they're going to shed some of their like, ace jack offs, ace queen offs, some of those types of hands. So, even like ace five of clubs may peel for a third, given that, they have like a bunch of backdoors and things of that nature. So yeah, like while we have ace X, they have a lot of ace X too. And generally when, I think the value is pretty split, I tend to play pretty passively and would check. And if the turn checks through, then I'm probably going to be placing a pretty chunky value bet with like ace king, ace queen, ace jack. And if villain bets big and I have like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, then I'm just going to call. And I like maintaining some value in my range. Plus, if I'm betting range too, I also have a lot of hands that like really benefit from playing for no money, like king queen, queen jack, king jack, maybe like 8-9 suited if we have 8-9 suited, heart type hands, 4-5 suited that we may 3-bet as like a double gut shot. So like, yeah, I have a lot of hands that like are totally cool with like realizing their equity when the turn checks through. But I think in general at 200 big blinds, I tend to play fairly defensively.
Good. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, and that's funnily enough, I'll just kind of harken back to like one of our old one-on-one coaching sessions back, and when I used to c-bet a third on the flop with my entire range. This is actually the exact strategy that you sort of recommended that I go with on the turn on turnover cards, or turn aces, was just checking my entire range, keeping my checking range protected. I guess like the only thing that I'll add to what you said was that like I found myself playing quite a few check raises on the turn, because when you check your range, you naturally have hands that want to play for lots more money when villain decides to put in a bet a hand like a set of tens or ace 10 or ace 3 suited. And I actually found that strategy pretty easy to balance out, right? Because I'm also checking hands like some pretty strong combo draws on the turn, like queen jack of hearts, king jack of hearts, king queen of hearts. Just very, very natural check raise bluffs that are easy to find and easy to balance out the value that I want to check raise. So back when I was playing the range 1/3 flop strategy, I actually found the range check on the turn to be a really, really just protected strat that was easy to manage as well.
Nice. So at least I'm consistent. The wolf in question decided to bet a third, which now I think we can say pretty bad, not great. I was joking earlier on their flop strat, but this turn bet is just not good. So sorry, Wolf, who played this hand and submitted it for some vicious feedback, but yeah, pretty not good. Interestingly, the in position villain decides to raise. So kind of the irony here is that, I imagine that the wolf folds. So the wolf actually only invested like a third pot on the turn and got raised and folded. So they didn't lose a ton. But yeah, I think betting the turn is pretty ambitious. They're even blocking, they have the jack of hearts. So they're even blocking hands like flush draws that they could bet for value against. So yeah, this is like this is a punt. Sorry, Wolf. Not so good.
Not a huge fan of of betting the turn either.
But that said, though, some good stuff in the first one. Now let's go to, look at this. We got pocket jacks again. Woohoo! Another easy spot. Cutoff opens to $5. Again, we're playing 200 L. Man, this one we got like 110 big blinds deep, but not as deep as before, so pretty normal spot. Wolf 3 bets to $22. Cutoff calls. Flop is 8-4 deuce. Rainbow. There's $45 in the pot. I think, once again, John, what's your preferred sizing here?
Gonna bet, again, somewhere between the 2/3 and 3/4 pot size with an overpair on this board texture.
Maybe we do it this time. Okay, we made a half pot, so we're
getting closer.
We're getting
I'm glad
closer.
they picked this size because this gives us some extra stuff to talk about on the turn, assuming this gets called.
Well, that would be a really lame hand. How could the turn be an overcard if they just fold? I just make.
Maybe if this gets raised, then we call.
Why don't we just pause Tactical Tuesday and just pretend that the turn was.
There's more ways to get to the turn than this bet getting called.
That's true. You could get raised. So cutoff calls. Turn is the ace of hearts. So ace 8-4 deuce with the ace 4 of hearts. Hero has red jacks. Please, for the love of God, I hope you check. Huh, we checked. And the villain checks behind. So anything you want to talk about on the turn?
I'm actually I was glad that our hero started off with a larger size flop c-bet because I think that's going to change my turn strategy quite a bit. I don't know exactly how big of an effect sizing down to half pot does, but let's just assume that they, villain continues a similar range facing half pot that they do facing, the 2/3 size that I said that I would use on the flop. I think they have a significantly lower, smaller number of ace-x combinations in their range once they call a big bet on the flop, right?
Sure.
They're in the previous situation, you said it wouldn't be crazy for them to float all of their ace-x on the flop. Here, that would be a little bit more unreasonable, right? I'm guessing that some hands ace 10 with no backdoor, flush draw, ace jack suited, those types of hands are finding some folds on the flop. If they peel hands ace 6, ace 7, I'm sure those hands are doing a lot of folding as well if they don't have the backdoor flush draw. So I think in this spot, this is a spot where probably we have a slight ace-x advantage, given that I think part of my c-bet strategy for the big size would include ace-x with a backdoor flush draw. So I would bet a hand like ace king of spades or ace king of hearts or ace king of diamonds for a big size on the flop as well. That would sort of be the balancing side for my overpairs that are going to bet big. So I think they have less ace-x here than less ace-x and less of whatever overcard peels on the turn than they would in the spot where we c-bet a third. That's actually going to lead me to wanting to c-bet the turn for a small size again. So I think this is actually the spot where I would take the turn size that the wolf and hand number 1 took and actually just bet a third on the turn and try to get called by, I think a region that's much more condensed to bluff catchers than weaker bluff catchers than ace-x than they were in the previous hand. So I think they're going to show up with way more 8x, pocket 9s, pocket 10s, pocket 7s, 6s, 5s, 4x. Now that they called a big bet on the flop instead of just a third. So much so that I feel more confident in my ability to place a profitable turn c-bet for a third pot. And I think I would do that with that would be my only turn size. Is I would bet that 1/3 size with my ace-x, and for bluffs it would just be the 2 overs that have now, for example, turned to flush draw. So a hand like king queen of hearts or queen jack of hearts or king 10 of hearts, something like that, jack 10 of hearts, 10 9 of hearts, etc., etc.
I really don't like it. I just think it's too thin. I think maybe if we bet 75% on the flop, then I would be more confident in seeing that as a possible.
Yeah. I was kind of going through the motions, assuming
half pot. I just think
I wanted to talk about the big size. But yeah, half pot. Yeah.
I really just hate betting the turn with jacks. So I'll be frank. I don't like it at all. I think it's just too hard to get called 3 streets. You're gonna bet a third on the turn, targeting hands that you could also just bet a third or half on the river and still target them for value once a turn checks through. So I think 9s or 10s or 8x isn't going to be playing for 3 streets. So you're not really getting any extra value by betting the turn. I'm not on board with betting the turn, but we didn't bet the turn.
Man. Don't you wish you bet the turn?
So the river's a jack of spades. We river a set, and now we have some options, right? There's 87 in the pot. Villain has 188 behind. What do you think here? It's a really interesting river card, by the way.
So I would guess that a lot of the range that we are targeting with like a big bet on the river likely bets themselves. I assume the largest part of their bluff catching range facing a big bet here is going to be some sort of ace-x. Maybe they, it's not unreasonable for them to call flop with a hand like, ace, queen of spades, ace, queen of diamonds, something like that. Don't know exactly what their turn strategy is going to be. I guess it wouldn't be crazy for them to check back some of those hands. I mean, they could have some very obvious flop calls that have now turned top pair that probably won't bet the hand like ace 3 suited or ace 5 suited. So I think my strategy on the river would be to overbet or check.
So which one do you do with jacks?
Overbet.
Yeah, I would check. For all the things that you said, I think that like villain's ace, like when we jam, I think we're targeting ace X, and I think when we check, ace X bets themselves. And I would really like to have some value in my check raise all in range on the river. So like personally, this hand to me is just like slam dunk. Hands that we're targeting gonna bet themselves, so I'm just gonna check and let villain bet themselves. Side benefit is that like once we double check, villain could just bluff jam, right? They could have a hand like king queen that they just like 2x rip with.
Yeah, or like 5-6 or 6-7.
5-6, 6-7. Like
I think that's like for me, that's like the biggest argument for checking is that they can find bluffs on the river with hands that can't call. I think for me, the argument for overbetting is that when I overbet for value, I'm very often surprised by how deep down in the bluff catching range I find villains going sometimes, where I'm like, wow, I did not expect 8-9 of diamonds to call 1.25x or 1.5x on the river, but hey, they found a call with 8x. So yeah, I think there's like I said, I think there's good arguments for checking, and I think there's good arguments for overbetting. And I would, I'm not married to one of those two options. I just generally trend the side of overbetting.
You make some good points. And if you'd like to hear more good points, I think you should click the subscribe button on YouTube. And if you have a strong preference for river action, you should leave a comment down below. But yeah, I think you make some good points. I still would rather check in this exact spot.
Comment below why you think I'm right and why you think Brad's wrong. Why you should just overbet this river. Let him know.
Yeah. What did the wolf do? They bet pot, which is the option that we didn't talk about, and probably not a great option. I think again should be overbetting or checking. I think one benefit for pot is like those hands that you're targeting like 8-9 of diamonds, maybe they call more at a higher frequency.
Yeah, you get to target a wider bluff catching range.
Yeah. So that could be the argument. Although I would rather just rip than bet pot personally. But with that said, villain folds, and the hand that villain folded, I guess we'll never know. Don't have it. So let's just imagine they folded 8-9 of diamonds, and John's overbet all in strat would have ended terribly for him. But
they would have checked back 8-9 of diamonds. So
that's true. No. All right, good show. I don't think I have anything left to talk about.
Yeah, tough spot. Yeah. Hopefully we don't have any more of these. But if we do, see you next week.
This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson. Coach Brad approved.